to the What If It's Not Depression podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Achina Stein, and today I'm interviewing Dr. Christina Bjorndal. She's a naturopath who brings her lived experience with depression and as a suicide survivor and having anxiety, bulimia, and a diagnosis of bipolar disorder type 1. She says she's also a psychosis survivor as well. She has clinical training as a naturopathic doctor, along with her additional training in mind-body medicine when striving to address patients' mental health concerns. After having overcome many mental health challenges, Dr. Chris is a gifted speaker and best-selling author who has shared her wellness philosophy with platforms such as Mariel, Hemingway's Out Comes the Sun show, the Jenny McCarthy show, the International Bipolar Foundation, and many other summits and docuseries. She is recognized as a top naturopath to follow by 2 independent organizations. Her book, Beyond the Label, is a comprehensive guide to naturopathic mental health. She's written 4 books on mental health, as well as created 2 courses, the Moving Beyond Mental Health Labels program for individuals and a clinician's integrative mental health program. Welcome, Dr. Chris.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I loved reading your book, and I want to show everyone a copy of the book here, one of her books. And I really enjoyed reading it. And flipping through the different tips that you have and in the areas that we're going to talk about. I would love for you to just give us a snippet. I know you have 8 chapters about your journey, and I loved reading through it. And I just commend you for talking about your journey, because it's really hard for people to do that. And I really would love for you to just give us a snippet and let people read the rest in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually what's in the book is only a snippet, actually. So it's interesting. But basically, in a nutshell, I struggled a lot with my mental health starting in my teenage years.
Mhm.
And I want to just mention, though, that prior to that, I was taking antibiotics for about 6 months or so to address acne. So it's really important to understand that there is a gut-brain connection here. Anyways, I had a swing when I was in my first year of university into anxiety and depression. Then I was prescribed medications, found myself in another place I'd never been before, which was having a psychotic event.
Mhm.
They had to wrestle me into a straitjacket. Off I went to the emergency and was left in a rubber room. That was also a traumatizing experience,
Mm,
given the diagnosis of bipolar disorder type 1. So
mm.
basically just wore the mask marching through the world that, you know what, I've got it all together on the outside, but really on the inside, I was struggling in so many ways. So basically, I continued on, worked in the corporate world, and then I did have a suicide attempt. I've had 3 actually of those. So eventually I realized, you know what, I got to figure out another way here, because the
Mm.
medical way with medication upon medication, and again, I'm not saying that I'm anti-medication, but it should work. And it
Right.
wasn't working for me. So I found my way to a nutritionally oriented psychiatrist and
Mhm.
and a naturopathic doctor, and that restored my mental well-being. And then I made a career change, and here I am. So
Yay.
that's the 57 years in a nutshell.
Wow. Wow. I am so jealous that you met Dr. Abramhofer and worked with him. That is so awesome. He definitely is a big name in our field. So in mental health and the orthomolecular background. Awesome. Yeah, it was
Mhm.
really nice. It was nice to read that. What I loved about what you wrote was you did a great job articulating all the different layers, of how things affected you from the past in real time, your reactions, and then that became another layer, and how you elucidated through your self-awareness, the impact of these things, and then processing it all, and then making decisions about how you're going to move forward. And despite all of that, you were very, very successful in your career. And so it really demonstrates how intelligence has nothing to do or very little to do with emotions and mental health, that they can operate very differently. Like you said, having this mask, but yet this was all going on for you. But wow, I'm really impressed with the way what you did with it all, but also the way you articulated it. Oh, it was great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, I think it's important for people to understand that, many of us are wearing a mask
mhm,
and we're kind of sort of slogging it through sometimes. And really, I mean, I think we want to credit Brené Brown here for bringing out this vulnerability piece and
mhm.
how that it is actually a strength, not a weakness.
Right.
Uh, and a lot of people will say, gosh, wow, you're so descriptive. You sell so much in those first 9 chapters of your book, or 8 chapters. And I'm like, gosh, that's like 1/10 of it,
Mm,
you know?
right.
So, but leaning on that vulnerability piece, the reason I wore this mask is because my original psychiatrist said, Chris, you can't tell anybody about this.
Mm,
Right. So that left this mark on me that, oh, wow, I've got something really deep, dark, and ugly that I got to zip up and lock away and throw away the key. Because if anybody finds out, holy moly, right?
right.
And in the financial world and being with bipolar disorder, the risk of mania, one of the symptoms is excessive spending. So, it was, I kept the lid on pretty
Right.
tight. So,
Right. Right. I know he probably meant to save you harm from how society reacts, but at the same time, and maybe he might have been right on some level, but at the same time you're harmed in a different way. Yeah, by judging it, and this illness, and not really not contributing to making changes in perception, of an illness, that it's an illness. It's not a
it's an
weakness.
illness. That's
Yeah.
right. Well,
Yeah.
and I think the context, let's put it in context too. This is late 80s, early 1990s. So if you reflect back then for people who were, who were around at that time,
Right.
there was no conversation going on, right? There was no conversation going on about
Right.
mental health except for a lot of confusion and stigma and shame. That was the climate that I grew up in. So,
Right.
it's so lovely to see that, we've got this ability to have conversations now and that's wonderful. But yet my thing is, listen, we've had a decade or two or three or four of talking about it. What are we doing now? What are we
Right.
actually doing? Right? And
Right.
that's one of my frustrations. Every time I get on a stage, I say mental health conditions are on the rise. And I've been getting on stages for 20 years. So,
Right.
right,
Yeah.
I'd love to get on a stage and say, guess what, guys? Mental health conditions are declining. We're doing
Right.
such a great job as clinicians out there. People are declining, but
Right. Right.
that's not the case. So,
Right. I think people are more open to talk about depression, anxiety, but it's still difficult for professionals to talk about bipolar one and psychosis in a workplace environment, about that. That's still kind of hidden or not talked about. But more people are thankfully talking about depression and anxiety. And we have, that's why I really commend you for talking about the suicide attempts, the psychosis, the bipolar one manic episodes that you've had. And I think it helps people to see that, you can be successful and not be labeled. So yay, beyond the label. I mean, I love the title of the book too. I was like, I love everything about what you do.
oh, thanks.
So yeah, just really living beyond the label. It's just a label, and people, you're more than just a label. That's awesome. So let's talk about how, I know, you became a naturopath, and now you're treating people with mental health problems. What would you say are the four aspects of health that you think are important to address a patient's mental health, but I mean, obviously overall health, because when, for our approach is really improve, a whole health of people, not just their mental health. So, but I'd love for you to focus on the mental health piece, and with the understanding that it is going to improve a person's overall health.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there really is no health without mental health, right? So
Right, right.
there's a ripple effect throughout the whole system. But basically, the big four areas are the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So when we think of, a human being, those are the four big picture areas that we want to be looking at. And
Hmm.
then most people, when they're in the Western world, they're really focused on that physical level alone. So
Mm.
with respect to that, what we want to understand is there's three major sort of macro systems in your body. You've got your neuroendocrine system or your hormones, you've got
Hmm.
your neurotransmitters, and then your organs of detoxification and your immune system. So that's where I started in my journey with Dr. Hoffer, was on that physical level. And that worked for a period of time until I then bumped up against the mental piece, the emotional piece, that spiritual piece. So that's why I think that you have to truly have a holistic mind, body, spirit approach. We need to be having conversations about these other aspects to help people fully regain their mental well-being.
Right, right, absolutely. So, what would you say? Where do you generally start with people?
hmm So where I'll start is first on that physical level, assessing, okay, which macro system is, or systems, recognize that, like in my own case, actually was all three of those systems had to be
Hmm.
supported, right?
Right,
My hormones were out of whack, my neurotransmitters were fritzy, and my organs of detoxification were not working very well. So all of that had to be addressed. But then once, did a better job at that, I still had to work with my reactivity and my people pleasing type A overachieving problem and my inability to set boundaries.
right.
And then the emotional piece, right? This mask that I was wearing, like repressing and suppression of emotions is, I just gave a lecture at an oncology conference discussing that, how the emotional suppression and repression contributes to a lot of health issues in people.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, so where I start on that part is this, basically this, what my naturopathic doctor taught me. It's called the 4 R's of working with problematic thoughts and breaking the thought emotion cycle. So we want to bring some awareness to, like, what are you thinking actually?
Mm,
And what is the nature of those thoughts? And people need to understand this important piece, that your thoughts, they create neuropeptides. And then the neuropeptides affect the hormones that you produce. And
right.
then those hormones that you produce affect how you feel.
Hmm.
A little bit of a chicken and an egg problem that we have.
Right.
So until I was taught this, I was one with the cloud. I was one with the dark cloud that I would live in for a lot of the time. And this cloud would descend and I would be in it and I could not see past it. But the analogy we want to use here is, you're not the cloud actually. You're actually the sky,
Hmm.
right? And as that sky, you can hold all kinds of weather, i.e., many different emotions. And the sun is actually shining, right? And that cloud will lift. So the thing with suicidal ideation, we want to understand that that is a temporary decision for or sorry, that's a permanent. So suicide is a
Yep.
permanent
Permanent
decision.
decision for a
Yes, for
temporary problem. I tell my patients that all the time that have suicidal thoughts. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
many people, yeah, so that's important, and for me, it's a big red flag that you're not loving yourself, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the deeper layers that need to be addressed. Once you've dealt with the physical, but you're right, there's all these loops that give you feedback between the different systems, between the physical, the mental, emotional, and spiritual. And so it's hopefully a spiral upward, but you really articulated how the spiral downward, all the different factors that caused the spiral downward for yourself. And so it is looking at all of those pieces and seeing how they're all connected, for sure.
Mhm.
So when you do you have certain steps that you start patients with
Yeah.
initially? I'm assuming it's food and sleep, and getting those foundational pieces in place first. But I'm also more than likely you tailor your program to where the patient's at the moment, right? There's going to be acute issues that need to be addressed right away. So tell me more about your initial approach when you see clients or patients.
Yeah, for sure. So we're always meeting somebody where they're at, right? So when you're practicing individualized medicine, it's, it is geared to that individual where they're at. But in a nutshell, the framework is this. So it's like I explained that we're building a health house. Your body that you're walking around in, that's your home. So we're going to build a health house. So the first foundational building blocks, as you mentioned, so nutrition, and we put a little bit of, supplements in there, and probably most people are on pharmaceuticals. So that's your first block. Then we want to look at sleep, exercise, and then the fourth is managing the stress piece. So that the next layer of the health house connects to that stress management, which is looking at your thoughts, your emotions, how you behave and react in the world, and your ability or inability to set boundaries. Next level of the house is the environment from 3 perspectives: quality of the air, food, and water. So a really important clue here, if you suspect, say somebody comes in and they're taking an SSRI medication like Prozac, they're not feeling better on it. So first clue is, okay, well, maybe that's not the right neurotransmitter then, right? We're supporting dopamine, we're supporting serotonin, maybe we need to support dopamine. Second idea under that could be, well, or maybe it's the wrong macro system, right? Maybe it's those other ones, the hormones, organs of detoxification. Third idea is, well, maybe there's something from the environment that's blocking the receptor, and it's not a deficiency problem at all, but yet a blockage problem. Right. So, we really want to understand that you can be well. So it's your job as a clinician, my job as a clinician, to figure out what's the obstacle there. So that's the first idea under the environment. Second is the idea of genetics versus epigenetics. So what I didn't mention in the opening is that I am adopted, and that is a trauma. There's many traumas that people go through, whether it's big T trauma or little t trauma. This is such a huge piece of the health puzzle that is being brought forth in the last decade, I would say, much more so than in the 50 decades prior. So that's really important. So genes load the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. That's the difference between genetics versus epigenetics. And then on that note, understanding this concept of as well of intergenerational trauma is also important. Great little book called It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallen, if people want to dive deeper into that topic. Third idea under the environment is this concept of neuroplasticity. So you are not a fixed lump of cement, right? Your brain, your body for that matter, is always turning over new cells, but you got to give it some new substrate to work with if you want to create a new you, right? I actually have more energy and feel the best I felt at 57 than I felt at 17.
Right.
And that is not the standard party line when it comes to aging. So I love this quote from one of my colleagues. She said, age well so other people look forward to it.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great quote.
Right. Next one on your health house, we're still building this mansion, is the next layer is compassion. So really important to develop compassion for yourself. I was walking around with this inner critic constantly, I'm going to use the word bully, beating me up. You're not doing it good enough. You're not doing it fast enough. You're not doing it, just fill in the blank enough. So that's the overachievingness. And that comes from compensating for this sense of lack that comes from this wound of adoption, this adoption wound. So that's fine. Being an overachiever has served me, absolutely. But it also has come at a great price as well, right? Absolutely. So, it's these things. So then the last area, the little top of your house here, is the spiritual piece. Now that we've built your house, we got to plant it somewhere. We got to put it on a property, right? We're not going to just be floating our house around in space. So you got to ground and root your property in, wrap it all up in love. So key question I ask every patient, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you with that sense of love for yourself? And similarly, where are you with that sense of compassion for yourself? Different questions, really important. Most commonly, I get an answer less than 6. Very rare to get an answer over 6, actually. So that's a clue for you, for people listening, and practitioners, patients, whoever, that this is important because
Absolutely.
you're with you the longest.
Right.
So you're not digging yourself. What's going on there?
Exactly. It's
And
very
it's
hard to be happy if you don't love yourself.
yeah,
And you
and
seek it from so many other sources other than yourself, but it really needs to start with yourself. Absolutely. Very, very
yeah,
important.
and I think we're reared as women. I mean, I know I was reared to be modest, to be seen and not heard, and to not be boastful, and not to be, egotistical, these kinds of words. But we want to understand that's not what we're saying when we're talking about love for yourself.
Right.
So, and if you want to be boastful, go for it. I mean,
Right. Right.
what's
Right. Absolutely. There's
yeah,
nothing wrong with that. If you talk about your wins, it's not necessarily boasting, right? So
celebrating,
we can
celebrate.
celebrate. Exactly. Celebration and talking about your wins is not the same thing as boasting and being jealous, or like, so that uh I think we've been raised to be jealous of each other rather than support each other, right? Yeah, I completely
Mhm.
agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love your analogy of the house. And it's looking at, the toxicity within the house, right? There's all different kinds of toxicities within the house that need to be looked at. Um, so yeah, there's definitely all of these layers. Did you find for yourself that there was one particular game changer, or did you feel like um, that you had to address all of these in order for you to reduce your episodes of depression or mania or psychosis or
Mhm.
or suicidal ideations? What's your own experience as well as what you're seeing with your patients?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot. And there is not one thing, but it is kind of like this domino effect. If you want to, again, using another analogy, say the ocean, and an ocean analogy, right? You're an ocean, and every wave of emotion that you have within this ocean, it's going to fall back into you. Every thought you have, those can explode like fireworks, but they're all going to fall back into this container that is you. Anything you put in your body, food wise. So it's this domino ripple effect. But the game changer, though, if there was and my route went this way. My route went nutrition first,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like naturopathic medicine first, with orthomolecular approach. That's where I started.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like I said, that got me so far until um, it didn't. And the other piece that I didn't mention, is I had bulimia.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
no one, I wasn't forthcoming with that. That's another condition that there's a lot of secrecy and a lot of shame. Um, so I had a lot of cracks in my nutritional foundation. So even though Dr. Hoffer's protocol, I was taking 5 psychotropic meds when I started with him, and I was added many supplements with him, but nobody asked me about my eating.
Mm-hmm.
And when I eventually tapered from those medications, if I did not take the supplements, my mood stumbled, right? So that showed me, okay, have I really fixed anything here?
Right.
I've substituted a pill from a pharmaceutical to a nutraceutical or a botanical,
Right.
but I'm still struggling. So have I solved anything actually?
Yeah.
Right? And I was struggling. I'll point out why. One of the reasons, because my diet was terrible.
Mm.
I was not eating. So one of my little books that I broke out is called The Essential Diet, Eating for Mental Health. It's in the back of Beyond the Label as an appendix called The Mental Health Diet.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to understand you cannot make neurotransmitters out of thin air.
Right.
You physically cannot make serotonin if you do not ingest tryptophan foods. You
Right.
physically cannot make dopamine if you do not ingest phenylalanine foods. Those
Right.
are essential amino acids, keyword being essential. You
Right.
can't make them yourself, right?
Absolutely.
If we're gonna send the human being in for an upgrade like we do our iPhones, let's upgrade that. Let's upgrade that.
Yep. Food is medicine. It
Yeah.
absolutely is medicine. And we talk about how digestion of and absorption of those foods is going to be important as well. So if you can't digest proteins, then that's going to be an issue. And we also have to make sure that the gut lining is working, and yeah, that your immune system's working at the gut lining, and looking at permeability issues. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
The
all
gut,
connected.
all important. And the gut health piece for me, I recently, so the gut health is super important. Like we really need not only that, so the gut lining, your ability to digest, your ability to assimilate, your ability to break down, etc. But also, what are the microbes doing in you, right? You
Mhm.
got 3 pounds of bacteria in your digestive tract alone, and what are they doing? And they're
Right.
signaling, right? They're creating, so the microbiome effect, it's a bi-directional connection here. So that was also, so every step of the way for me, when I improve another, uncover another stone and improve upon that, my health goes to the next, I feel like I just get better as I age versus worse as I age, right? So
Right.
that's another huge piece, is the microbiome, the gut health, because we're just coming into the world nowadays with moms being on IVs, antibiotic. I'm not saying perhaps to use them, but you have to think about, well, what have I disrupted in the milieu that is this individual? The homeostatic balance of this person is now tilted. So how do I bring it back to
Right.
balance?
Absolutely. I mean, we often get asked, should I take the antibiotics? It's like, well, it's a risk benefit ratio. You have to look at the benefits, and, antibiotics can save lives,
Absolutely.
just like for some people, medications can save lives, so this is not an anti-medication and an anti-antibiotic talk. It's really about looking at benefit risk. And if you have to take antibiotics, then you need to respond to that by taking probiotics, or
Gotta
recovering from that decision, and getting the benefits. So yeah, I think that's all good. Yeah. So I wanted to I know you mentioned people learning to trust their intuition and their heart. And I find that that's really tough for people, especially when your world has been turned upside down, and then you're listening to people giving you advice or treatments, right? And having to make decisions about yourself, and how do you do that? So can you talk more about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's going to come back to the question about the game changer. So the real,
Oh,
I think,
yes.
big game changer for me, well, leads into the answer to this question, was learning how to manage my mind,
Mm,
right, and my emotions. And so that is so important for people. And where I think the two worlds need to overlap a little bit more, the world of psychology, and then the world of naturopathic medicine, functional medicine, and
mm,
then we've got the Western world. So I like to use the word original medicine actually to describe.
mhm.
So we have to, again, if we're a container that's holding the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual, we want to understand that we have to be talking to people about this voice in their head,
Mhm.
which is often talking,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And but underneath this voice is another voice, which is, was people refer to as the voice of stillness,
Mm,
or your soul, or your spirit, or your intuition, or your gut instinct. Lots of different words. There can be distinctions between all of those. But in terms of listening to your intuition, we can do a little exercise if you're up for it. It's
mhm,
pretty simple. Yeah? You
mhm.
game? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So what we'll do is we'll just put our hands on our heart,
Mhm.
and we'll just take a breath here. Just breathing in, and then we'll exhale. And then we're just going to have a conversation with your heart. And if you want to keep your eyes closed, it gets the ego out of the way, or you can keep them open, doesn't matter. But repeat what I said, the phrase, and then the answer for yourself. So the first one is, and people who are listening can do this along with us, it's heart, show me where you are. So just repeat that, heart.
Heart, show me where you are.
And then just let us know if there is anything that comes up. And there's no right or wrong. It could be a word, a color, phrase, a feeling.
Well, color of love comes up for me. So red. I
Right.
associate
Nice.
red and love.
Perfect. Very
Mhm.
nice. Okay, so breathing in again. So the next one is heart. Heart, will you ever lie to me? Yes or no?
Heart, will you ever lie to me? Yes or no? No.
Heart, have I always followed you? Yes or no?
Heart, have I always followed you? Yes or no? Not always.
Not always. Heart, how do you feel when you hear I haven't always followed you?
Heart, how do I feel? I'm sorry, I missed the
Yep.
exact
Heart,
statement.
how do you feel
How do you feel
when you hear I haven't always followed you?
when you hear I haven't always followed you? Disappointed.
And heart, why do you feel disappointed?
And heart, why do you feel disappointed? Because I'm telling you the truth.
Beautiful. Take a breath with that because I'm telling you the truth. Breathing in. Hmm. Heart, can you forgive me for not always following you? Yes or no?
Heart, can you forgive me for not always following you? Yes or no? Yes.
Perfect. And heart, is it possible that you are my intuition dwelling within? Yes or no?
Is it possible that you are my intuition? Yes or no? Yes.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you for
Mhm.
that. That's it, that little experiment.
Yeah.
So what we want to understand is that we have these two voices,
Mhm.
and one is a voice of often from the egoic mind, which is attached to the voice of fear, usually quite busy telling us what we can and can't do, judging the moment, throwing off opinions, criticisms, etc. And
Right.
then we've got this other voice that's kind of our guide that, like you said, I've got
Mhm.
the answers for you, essentially, right?
Right.
So the quote that I want to leave you with is from Joseph Campbell. There's two quotes actually from Joseph Campbell. One pertains to this, which is the heart must usher the mind into the zone of revelation. So we
Mhm.
want to learn to live our lives from this place of heart-centeredness versus mind-centeredness. And most of us are doing it the other way around, right? We're
Mhm.
living from the head and not trusting this voice. When I had the intuitive hit that, and this went on for quite like months on end because I was wanting to leave my corporate job, what to do, and this answer kept coming, go back to school, become a naturopathic doctor. Well, the following up to that was constantly, you can't do that. You're crazy. You can't go back to high school. You got to go back to high school. You're 33 years old. Don't quit this job. You better not leave this job. Like just on and on, right? Um, but I didn't listen to that. And I'm not saying for people to quit their jobs, but what I am saying is the universe is there to support your back. It does have you. It does have you.
Right.
But we have to learn to trust it. So let's start with little things like tuning in, taking a couple breaths, brown rice or quinoa. Okay.
Mhm.
Or if you're anti-grains, then chicken or beef. Or if you're anti-protein, then broccoli or carrots. Like just or blue pants or brown pants. Like just learn to tune in.
Right.
Because then you'll get those hits. You might, like phone your mother, you might trust them.
Mhm.
Or when you do want to move into something, you can inquire and eventually build this muscle. It's kind of it's a skill, it's a strength, it takes time. The other quote I love from Joseph Campbell, I'll just mention because I mentioned I'd say two, is the psychotic drowns in the same water the mystic swims.
Mm.
I found that one very impactful because as somebody who's had psychosis, we do drown people in medication to suppress that experience, to keep people, well, it's just not an easy thing to navigate for
Right.
anybody, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a matter of it's like an on-off button, so to speak. It's difficult to modulate and so it can be unsafe to remain in a psychotic state, but then it's unsafe in a different way to have all those symptoms completely suppressed with side effects of medications as well. So yeah, I like that quote because it's true that some people are mystics because of almost like if they're able to be in this controlled kind of psychotic state, so to speak. So it's a bit more modulated, I would imagine.
Right.
So
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I loved your heart questions,
Yeah.
and getting people to start learning, or connecting, I should say, because learning is more of a cognitive connecting to their heart and trusting their intuition, which does take time. And it's really a good idea to start with things that are neutral or basic or low risk, so to
Low
speak.
risk, no
No
consequences. No.
consequences. Yeah, to really trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
You know what? And it's I'll consult my heart, and many times I always consult my heart, and yet I still don't always listen. Right?
Mhm.
I'll do what the ego is telling me because of the fear piece. And then I'll be like, oh goodness. So it's for me, it's just become a little bit of a just an exercise. It's like, okay, well, I'm gonna lean in and I'm gonna trust. I'm gonna attempt to trust. And then I often do something different. And then and then I bear the consequences of that. And I'm like, damn, I should have listened to that voice, the other voice, but I didn't. Okay, well, hopefully I will more next time, right? It's
Right.
just I mean, learning is still a good word. I mean, we are still learning to embrace this part of ourselves, side, voice, whatever you want to use. But those I learned that from want to give credit to who where it's due. It's not from me. I didn't create those. That was from Maston Kipp.
Mm.
Those I learned that from him. But I
Oh,
love it, and I try to share it as often as I can with people. It's lovely.
that's awesome. Yeah, I love it. I love it too. I will definitely look into that person's whatever it is, if they wrote a book or yeah, awesome. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we need to wind down a bit. I'm curious if there's anything else that you would like to add that we haven't talked about, um, in terms of mental health. And I'm also curious to know if you've been able to um, heal that part of yourself, and control the episodes and not have as many, and find yourself in a much happier place. Or if this is, still, if you're willing to talk about it, if it's still even a struggle for you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's important to ask because I want people to understand that healing isn't a destination.
Mhm.
Okay, it's not like trying to. It's you're on this journey and this journey that we call life, and there's going to be ups and downs and twists and turns.
Right.
So in terms of my, and I think the other thing that it's important to mention is so the last chapter of my book is called The Myths of Mental Illness. And these were things that I was told
Mm.
and that I feel I've busted, if you will. So, one of them being, which I think addresses your question, is is there a cure?
Hmm.
Are you healed? And I like to think that I'm unfolding and that yes, I am in this moment speaking with you. I'm going to use the word healed. However, I am in, you would think I would be in menopause, but I'm not quite yet. I would like to be. Listen, as an overachiever, I do not need to win the record of the oldest person to go through menopause. Like, I'm good, right? But anyway, I'm not quite there, but I'm hoping to be there in another, whatever, 9 months from now. So the point is that your hormones are a big piece of this puzzle too. But yes, I've been stable from a depression, um, anxiety. Those are things that are easily, not easily, but easy for me now to manage.
Mm.
Psychosis has not arrived since 2008. So we're getting to be 16 years on the outside of my last episode,
Mhm.
that one. And I think the key to managing that for myself has been so sleep, nutrition, because we don't want to have foods that stimulate us, like just sugar and inflammatory foods, essentially.
Right.
Getting rid of those, sleep, and then this whole stress management piece, which is huge, right?
Right.
I mean, it's
Mhm.
huge. So, I like to think that I'm in this sort of process of unfolding, and
Mhm.
in this moment. Yes, I would love to sit here and say, yeah, I am very well. I'm very happy in this moment. Yes.
Mhm.
You know,
Awesome. Yeah, I like that term or that word, unfolding, because you can only know what's happening now and not necessarily what's going to happen in the future. And you don't know what's going to, we couldn't predict the pandemic, so things can happen that we can't predict, and how we um, respond or react to those events is a very individual thing. And so hopefully with your unfolding, you will respond differently.
I wanted to mention that really quickly. I'm glad you brought that up. I did want to mention that the
Yeah.
pandemic for me was the first 3 weeks of that,
Mhm.
I did a nosedive. I was fine,
Mm.
right? No storms in my ocean. Everything was fine. No clouds in my sky. And then at the first 3 weeks of that, I big time nosedive. And then I was like, my goodness, Chris, what has changed? What has changed? So important question to ask yourself if you find yourself all of a sudden in a or gradually dipping into a place of that you don't want to be,
Right.
perhaps. Recognizing that everything is happening for your greater learning, though. So there is never no place that you're not supposed to be. You always are where you are because you're supposed to be there for your own
Mhm.
spiritual growth. That's probably another podcast to talk about that. But my
Sure.
point being, you want to reflect back. You want to look back. Well, what have I changed? And the one thing I changed was I brought into my life the media.
Mm.
I was like refreshing my computer, for the updates. And then I realized this is not helping me.
Mm. Right.
So I stepped off stage left, exit that building. And so I bring that up just to mention to people, be careful of what you're consuming, not
Right.
just food, but media.
Right.
And media, and not just media, your relationships, so anything in your environment, very important, very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of fear in the media, a lot of fear. So probably got triggered some things, in that. What's interesting is that a lot of people assume that the pandemic was bad for everyone. There's a number of people like, wow, this is the best because now I don't have to perform in front of people, so people who have social anxiety, especially if they're in school, now they're at home, and then it's like, I'm not being bullied anymore. So yeah, everybody experiences things differently. Yeah, it really does.
For
Yeah.
the introverts, as I'm more so on that line, or more of a pro quiet person, I guess. Uh, I was like, I'm loving this.
Hmm.
Once I stopped listening to the media, once I stopped, and I'm not loving that people are suffering. I want to make sure I'm not saying that, but I just, for my own sense of well-being, it was actually, once I got through. I mean, again, it brought up lots of things for lots of people, right?
Right.
Lots of things
Absolutely.
for lots of people. So I'm glad we're on the other, hopefully moving towards the other side of that.
Uh,
And,
right.
and and then we're left to pick up some of the pieces, right?
Mhm.
Too. So
Absolutely. Yeah. So I will definitely have this information about your books in the show notes. But if you could let people know where you're located and how they can find you, that would be great, just in case people are just listening. Um,
yes, for sure. So I'm in Edmonton, Canada, and my website is my clinic website is the best probably to go to. So naturalterrain.com. And then
mhm.
I just changed my personal website. So it's Christina-Bjorndal. Um, maybe I'll send you the new link for that one.
Okay.
And then there's the usual suspects that we were just talking about. So social media,
Right.
Instagram, not that I necessarily want to encourage people to go there. So
Yes, and I know you've shared the 4 R's tools for working. Um,
problem.
it's a link for something you're offering to give away to whoever's watching this. And yeah, thank you so much. I know that people will really enjoy this episode, and I forgot to ask everyone, if you enjoy this episode, please click the like button. Usually say that in the beginning. But yeah, I will include all of those links for people to learn more about you and get your books and to really help with their mental health, and just to even be aware that there's other ways to address these mental health issues, including not just depression and anxiety, but including psychosis and mania as well. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you so much. Take care.